It's a strange thing to become your own husband's mother-in-law, to sit across from him at a family dinner and have him call you Mom. It's a title that should be filled with warmth, with love. For me, it's a cold, hollow echo, a reminder of the twisted path I walked, a path that started not with love, but with a pain so deep it cracked my world in two. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how my marriage ended, and how, in the most heartbreaking way, a new family began. It all began with a text message. Isn't that how so many stories like this start now? A flash of light on a phone screen in the dark, a simple innocent sound that slices through the quiet of a happy home and leaves only the silence in its wake. I wasn't looking for it. I was happy, or at least I thought I was. Mark and I had been married for 10 years. We had a comfortable life, a nice house, a routine that felt like a warm blanket. We were trying for a baby. We talked about names. We dreamed about a future with little footsteps in the hall. But that night, as Mark slept soundly beside me, his phone buzzed on his nightstand. Once, twice, a third time. It was past midnight. Who texts at that hour? A prickle of something. Not quite fear, more like curiosity. Made me reach for it. The screen lit up my face in the dark. The message was from a number not saved in his contacts. But the preview was enough. I miss you already. Can't wait for Friday night? The world did not stop turning. The clock on the wall kept ticking. But inside me something broke. A fundamental trust. The very foundation of our 10 years together just shattered. I put the phone back. I lay down. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. The man lying next to me, the man whose breathing I knew as well as my own, was a stranger. And in that moment of devastating silence, a terrible, quiet thought whispered in my mind. It wasn't a thought of confrontation. It wasn't a thought of screaming or crying. It was colder, more calculated. If he could betray our family, then maybe I could build a new one, without him. To understand the madness of what I did, you have to understand the world I was living in. Our family wasn't just Mark and me. His father, Arthur, was a huge part of our lives. Arthur was solid. He was a retired carpenter, a man of few words but profound kindness. His hands, rough and scarred from a lifetime of work, could create the most beautiful things. He had built the dining table we ate at every Sunday. He had fixed the loose step on our porch, without me even asking. He was a constant, gentle presence. His wife, Eleanor, Mark's mother, had passed away from cancer 5 years earlier. We all felt that loss deeply. The house felt emptier without her laughter. Arthur seemed to shrink a little. The light in his eyes dimmed. Mark and I made sure he was never alone for long. We had him over for dinner every week. We helped him with groceries, with bills, with the heavy silence of his big empty house. I loved Arthur, not like a father, not quite, but with a deep, respectful affection. He was the father I wished I had. My own dad had left when I was little. So Arthur's quiet strength, his unwavering reliability, meant everything to me. He would often come over on Wednesday afternoons. I worked from home and he'd show up with a bag of fresh pastries from the bakery he liked. We'd have coffee together at the kitchen island. "How's the world of numbers, Clara?" He'd ask. "I'm an accountant. It's quiet today, Arthur. Just like I like it," I'd say, pouring his coffee black, just the way he preferred. He'd nod, a small, content smile on his face. We'd sit in a comfortable silence, watching the birds in the garden. It was peaceful. It was safe. Mark was different from his father. Where Arthur was steady, Mark was all charm and energy. He was a salesman, always talking, always moving. He swept me off my feet when we met in our late 20s. He was exciting. He made me feel alive. But sometimes over the years, that excitement felt like restlessness. He was always on his phone, always planning the next big thing, the next deal. I mistook that restlessness for ambition. I thought it was just who he was. Looking back, I see the small cracks I chose to ignore. The business trips that got a little longer. The new female colleagues he mentioned a little too often. the way he'd sometimes look at me, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that after 10 years, this was just what marriage felt like. I was building my life on sand, and I didn't even know it. I was so busy looking at the beautiful house on the surface, I never thought to check the ground beneath my feet. And Arthur, dear kind Arthur, he was the bedrock. He was the one solid thing in my life. He never missed a Sunday dinner. He always remembered my birthday. He called me just to check if our leaking faucet was still dripping. The day after I found the text, Arthur came over for his usual Wednesday coffee. I was a wreck. I hadn't slept. My eyes were puffy. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. He took one look at me and his smile faded. "Clara," he said, his voice low with concern. "Are you all right?" That simple question, asked with such genuine care, was my undoing. Tears filled my eyes. I tried to blink them back. "I'm fine, Arthur, just a bad night." He didn't push. He never did. He just took the coffee mug from my shaking hands and finished making the coffee himself. He pushed the pastry bag towards me. "You need to eat something," he said softly. In that moment, his simple fatherly kindness felt like a life raft, and I was drowning. The plan, if you could even call it that, didn't form all at once. It was a seed, planted in the toxic soil of my hurt and anger. It grew in the dark, fed by every lie Mark told me. He became slick with his deceptions. "Working late at the office," he'd say, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine. "A client dinner," he'd claim, when his phone was switched off for hours. I stopped asking. I stopped crying. I built a wall around my heart, brick by bitter brick. And on the other side of that wall, I started to look at Arthur differently. It wasn't about love. Not then. It was about revenge. A twisted, cruel revenge. If Mark could find comfort in the arms of another woman, I would find comfort in the one man who would hurt him the most. His own father? It started small, innocently. I began dressing a little nicer for our Wednesday coffees. I wore the lavender sweater Arthur once said looked nice on me. I made his favorite lemon tarts. I asked him more questions about his life, about Eleanor, about his work. He seemed to open up. He told me stories I'd never heard, about how he and Eleanor met at a town dance, about building their first table together, how she'd sanded the edges until they were smooth as silk. "She had so much patience," he said, a distant look in his eyes. Me, I just wanted to get it done. But she taught me, the best things in life take time. You can't rush them. His words felt like a judgment on my own rushed, broken marriage. I pushed the feeling away. I began to see the loneliness in him, a deep, quiet river of it, running under his calm surface. He missed his wife. He missed sharing his life, and I was so desperately lonely in my own marriage. We were two lonely souls, orbiting each other. One Wednesday, it was raining, a cold autumn rain that tapped against the window panes. Arthur was telling me about a bookshelf he was building for a neighbor. "It's good to keep my hands busy," he said, looking at his own rough palms. "The house gets too quiet." "I know the feeling," I whispered without thinking. Our eyes met. A long, silent understanding passed between us. It was the first crackle of something that wasn't fatherly or daughterly. It was just a man and a woman acknowledging a shared pain. The following Sunday dinner was tense. Mark was distracted, texting under the table. I watched him, my heart like a stone. I turned to Arthur, who was sitting next to me. "Arthur, this stew is delicious," I said, my voice a little too bright. I put my hand on his arm just for a second. A casual, friendly touch. But it wasn't casual. I saw Mark glance up, a flicker of confusion on his face. I saw Arthur's cheeks color just a little. I had crossed a line, a tiny, almost invisible line. But I had crossed it. Later, as we were cleaning up, Mark cornered me in the kitchen. "You and my dad seem close lately," he said, his voice tight. I kept washing the dishes, my back to him. "He's easy to talk to," I said calmly. "He listens." Mark was silent for a moment. I could feel his confusion, his unease. It gave me a dark, bitter satisfaction. "Yeah, well," he muttered. "Just don't bother him with our stuff, okay? Our stuff." As if our marriage was just a minor inconvenience, the bitterness inside me grew. My conversations with Arthur became the highlight of my week. They were my secret rebellion. I started going to his house saying I needed help with things. A shelf that needed hanging, a picture that needed framing. His workshop was in his garage. It smelled of sawdust and wood stain. It was a place of creation. We'd talk for hours. I started sharing little things. Not about Mark's affair, not yet, but about my own loneliness, my fears about never becoming a mother. He listened. He really listened. He'd stop his work, put down his tools, and just look at me, his kind eyes taking in every word. One afternoon, I was holding a piece of wood for him as he sawed. We were standing close. I could feel the warmth of his body. I could smell the clean scent of his soap. He finished the cut and looked down at me. Our faces were inches apart. The air in the workshop grew still. The only sound was the soft hum of the overhead light. "Clara," he said, my name. A soft sigh on his lips. I didn't move. I just looked into his eyes and I saw it there too. A longing, a confusion, a battle. He took a slow step back. He cleared his throat. I think that should hold," he said, his voice rough. He was talking about the shelf, but I knew he was talking about us, about the invisible line we were both trembling on the edge of. The game had changed. It was no longer just my game. He was a player now too, and I had no idea how to stop it. I'm not even sure I wanted to. The turning point came on a cold, clear night in December. Mark was supposed to be at a company Christmas party. He'd put on his best suit, sprayed on cologne and given me a quick, absent-minded kiss on the cheek. "Don't wait up," he'd said. The moment the door closed behind him, the house felt like a prison. The silence was deafening. I knew, with a cold certainty, that he wasn't going to any company party. He was with her. The anger and pain rose in me like a tide, choking me. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't breathe. Before I even knew what I was doing, I had my coat on and was in the car. I didn't have a destination in mind. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I just drove, through the brightly lit streets, past houses filled with happy families, their Christmas lights twinkling like mockery. And then, I found myself turning onto Arthur's street. I pulled up outside his dark house. Only the porch light was on. I sat in the car for a long time, my heart hammering. What was I doing? This was madness. This was wrong. But the image of Mark, laughing with another woman, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. The hurt was a physical ache. I got out of the car and walked to his door. I rang the bell. He answered after a moment, wearing a warm flannel shirt and looking surprised. "Clara, is everything all right? Is it Mark?" The concern in his voice broke the last of my resistance. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. Come in, you're freezing," he said, ushering me inside. The house was warm, quiet. A single lamp was on in the living room, next to his favorite armchair. A book was lying open on the side table. He led me to the sofa and sat me down. He didn't ask any more questions. He just went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water. He sat next to me, a careful distance away, and waited. The story tumbled out of me. All of it. The text message, the lies, the late nights, the perfume, my crushing, devastating loneliness, the feeling that my life, my future, had been stolen from me. I talked for what felt like an hour. He never interrupted. He just listened, his face a mask of growing sadness and shock. When I finally finished, I was exhausted, empty. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. "I'm sorry, Arthur. I'm so sorry to burden you with this." He was silent for a long time. He looked down at his hands, clasped tightly in his lap. When he looked up, his eyes were glistening. "Clara?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. My boy is a fool. He has thrown away the most precious thing a man can have." He shook his head. "I am so ashamed, and I am so sorry he has done this to you." His words were a balm on my raw heart. Here was the father, acknowledging the son's sin. It was the validation I had been desperately craving. He doesn't love me anymore, Arthur. I whispered. Then he doesn't deserve you, Arthur said, with a firmness I'd never heard before. He reached out then and took my hand. His large, warm, calloused hand enveloped mine. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a gesture of comfort, of solidarity. But as our hands touched, something shifted in the room. The air became charged. We were just looking at each other, two lost people clinging to a raft in a stormy sea. The years between us, the family ties, all of it seemed to melt away in the raw honesty of that moment. I leaned forward, or he did. I still don't know. But then his lips were on mine. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was slow, tentative, sad. It tasted of salt tears and regret. It was a kiss born from shared loneliness, not from love. And for a few seconds, I let it happen. I let myself get lost in the feeling of being wanted, of being seen. This good man, this solid man, was kissing me. It was the ultimate revenge against Mark. But then reality crashed down on me. I pulled back sharply, my hand flying to my mouth. I saw the same horrified realization in Arthur's eyes. He looked like he'd been struck. Oh, God. He breathed, scrambling back. Clara, I am so sorry. I shouldn't have... No, I said, standing up, my legs feeling like jelly. It was me. I shouldn't have come here. The shame was immediate and overwhelming. I had done the very thing I had accused Mark of. I had betrayed our family. I had used this good, kind man as a weapon in my war. I have to go, I stammered, heading for the door. Clara, wait, he said, his voice pleading. But I didn't wait. I fled. I ran out of his house into the cold night, and I drove home sobbing the entire way. I had wanted to break something. I just never imagined I would be one of the broken pieces. The days that followed were a blur of silence and shame. I avoided Arthur. He didn't call. Our Wednesday coffee stopped. The comfortable rhythm of our lives was shattered. Mark noticed the tension, but he misread it completely. He thought I was just giving him the silent treatment for his own absences. He started trying harder. He came home early. He brought me flowers. It was too little, too late. Every bouquet felt like an insult. I couldn't look at him without seeing Arthur's horrified face. I couldn't lie in our bed without feeling the weight of my own betrayal. The revenge I had craved had turned to ashes in my mouth. I didn't feel powerful. I felt cheap. I felt cruel. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Arthur called me. His voice on the phone was quiet, formal. Clara, he said, we need to talk. Can you meet me? At the park by the lake? I agreed, my heart in my throat. I knew what was coming. An end. A final, terrible goodbye. I found him sitting on a bench looking out at the gray, frozen lake. He looked older, tired. He didn't smile when I sat down next to him. We sat in silence for a while, watching our breath mist in the cold air. I haven't been able to sleep, he said finally, still not looking at me. What I did, what we did, it was a terrible mistake, a betrayal of my son, a betrayal of Eleanor's memory, and a betrayal of you, Clara. I started to cry, silent tears freezing on my cheeks. It was my fault, Arthur. I came to you. I wanted to hurt Mark. I used you. And I am so sorry. He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were full of a deep, profound sadness. But not anger. Never anger. We were both in pain, he said softly. We were both looking for a lifeline. We grabbed onto each other, and we almost pulled each other under. He took a deep breath. I love my son. Despite his mistakes, I love him. And I care for you, Clara. Deeply. But not like that. What we felt. That wasn't love. That was grief. His words were like a key, unlocking the truth in my own heart. He was right. It wasn't love. It was the grief for my dying marriage. It was his grief for his lost wife. We had confused the two. What do we do now? I whispered. We do the only thing we can do, he said. We tell the truth. And so we did. The three of us sat in our living room that evening. The air was thick with dread. Mark knew something was terribly wrong. Arthur spoke first. His voice was steady, but his hands were trembling. He told Mark everything. About my pain. About his loneliness. About the night I came to his house. He confessed it all. He took responsibility. He finished by looking directly at his son. Mark, I failed you as a father. I am more ashamed than I can ever say. But you also failed Clara as a husband. We have all made terrible mistakes in this room. The look on Mark's face. It was something I will never forget. It was a storm of emotions. Shock, betrayal, anger, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. He looked from his father to me and he saw the whole ugly picture. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He just stood up, walked out of the room, and we heard the front door slam shut. Our marriage was over. There was no coming back from this. The divorce was quiet, messy, and filled with a deep, unspoken sorrow. Mark moved out. He moved to another city for a new job. I heard later that his relationship with the other woman didn't last. Some part of me was sad for him. The boy who had lost his way. Arthur and I were left in the wreckage. The silence between us was a canyon. For months we had no contact. It was the most painful part of it all. I had not only lost my husband, I had lost my best friend, my anchor. Then one day, a package arrived at my door. It was a small, beautifully crafted wooden box. There was no note, but I knew who it was from. The lid fit perfectly. The wood was smooth, polished with care. It was an offering, a silent message. I am sorry. I am still here, I didn't call him. But a week later, I saw him in the supermarket. We stood at the end of the cereal aisle just looking at each other. The pain was still there, fresh and sharp. But then he gave me a small, sad smile, and I smiled back. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Time is a strange healer. It doesn't erase the scars, but it softens their edges. It allows new memories to grow around the old, painful ones. Slowly, carefully, Arthur and I found our way back to each other. It took years. It started with a brief, awkward phone call on my birthday. Then, a coffee in a public cafe. The conversations were stilted at first. We talked about the weather, about the news. We carefully avoided the deep, painful chasms of our past. But the foundation of genuine affection we had built over a decade was strong. It was cracked, but it hadn't completely crumbled. We began to rebuild. A new relationship. A different one. We were no longer father-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were two people who had been through a fire together and had both been burned. We became friends. True friends. He helped me when I decided to sell the house and buy a smaller place. I helped him when he had a small health scare. We started having dinner once a month. We talked about our lives. We even eventually were able to talk about Mark. The anger was gone, replaced by a shared, sad acceptance. Mark found out about our renewed friendship. He was furious at first. He called it a sick joke. But as the years passed, even that anger faded. He found a new partner. He started a new life. He and his father began to talk again, tentatively. The bond between father and son, though scarred, proved unbreakable. Life moved on, and then, last year, something beautiful happened. I met someone, a kind, quiet man named David. He's a teacher. He's nothing like Mark. He's steady, reliable. I was nervous to introduce him to Arthur. It felt like a final, strange test. We all had lunch together. It was awkward for the first 10 minutes. But then, Arthur started asking David about his work. They found a common love for old Western films. I sat and listened to them talk, and my heart felt so full it could burst. At the end of the lunch, Arthur shook David's hand. Then he turned to me and hugged me. A real warm, fatherly hug. "I'm happy for you, Clara." He whispered in my ear, "You deserve this." In that moment, I felt the last of the old shame and guilt finally release its hold on me. We had come full circle. This summer, I married David. It was a small, simple ceremony in a garden. Arthur was there. He sat in the front row. He gave me away. As I walked down the aisle towards my future, my hand tucked in the crook of Arthur's arm, I thought about our long, painful journey. The house we had built on the sand of hurt and revenge had collapsed. But from the rubble we had both managed to build something new, something on solid ground. After the ceremony, during the reception, Mark came up to me. He had come with his new wife. It was the first time we had spoken properly in years. He looked older, calmer. He smiled at me, a genuine, peaceful smile. "You look happy, Clara," he said. "I am," I said, "and I meant it." He nodded, his eyes drifting over to his father, who was laughing with David. "I'm glad you two worked it out," he said, his voice a little thick. "He needs you in his life." "And I need him," I said softly. He leaned in and gave me a quick, gentle kiss on the cheek. It was a kiss of goodbye, of forgiveness, of peace. Later, as the sun was setting, Arthur found me sitting alone for a moment, watching the dancers. He sat down beside me. "A beautiful day," he said. "The most beautiful," I replied. We sat in a comfortable silence, just like we used to in my old kitchen all those years ago. The past was still there, a part of us, but it no longer defined us. "Arthur?" I said after a while. "Yes, Clara." I looked at this good, kind man. This man who was no longer my father-in-law, but something more and something less. A friend, a piece of my history, a part of my family. "Thank you," I said. "For everything." He understood. He reached over and patted my hand just once, his rough carpenter's hand gentle on mine. "No, Clara," he said, his eyes warm. "Thank you." And in that moment I understood the lesson of it all. Life is not a straight road. It's a tangled, messy, difficult path. We make wrong turns. We get lost in the dark. We hurt people. We get hurt. But if we are brave enough to face our mistakes, and if we are lucky enough to have a little grace in our hearts, we can sometimes find our way to a new kind of love. A love that is not passionate or perfect, but a love that is deep and forgiving and true. It's the love that remains after the storm has passed. The story we have told is fictional, but is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We're not sharing this to pass judgment, but in the hope that someone listens and pauses to think, how many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm so curious. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses,